So let's get a word on this story and a few of the other big stories of the day as well. Political commentator Charlie Downs is back with us. How are you doing, Charlie?
Very well, Ian. How are you?
Good as gold at this end. Nice to have you with us again. So we're picking up on that story. Let's concentrate on this. The National Opinion Poll putting Reform UK ahead of Labour. Nigel Farage has something to say, of course, about Starmer's 6 promises to the nation. Let's have a listen to him in action on last night's Question Time.
So I sat and watched, listened to Keir Starmer's speech, and I was very pleased with myself. I managed to stay awake right until the very end. Which, given how bland the delivery was, how scripted the whole thing was, how lacking in any sense of emotion or message delivery, was remarkable. The 6 milestones doesn't even mention immigration, the boats, or anything. And I actually genuinely think that the milestones will become millstones as they fail on every single one of them.
And that, I think, Charlie, is why Nigel Farage's star is rising.
Yeah, well, I think what you were saying just now was quite interesting, because if we go back to actually the point of democracy to begin with, it is representation. People want to feel as though they are represented in the halls of power. And there are, like you say, certain leaders that come around who, although they might not belong to the same, for instance, economic class, to the people that they are seeking to speak for, you know, the people, say, for example, the working class in the Red Wall, for example, a lot of them felt represented by Nigel Farage, felt represented by Reform UK. And this is something that we haven't seen for a while in British politics. I think Boris Johnson had this kind of thing about him as well, to a certain extent, although people then came to see him for what he truly was during COVID and so on. But this is, I think, this is Reform's great strength, because look at the competition. You've got Kemi Badenoch for the Conservatives, who I don't think anybody really feels like they are represented by her, and Keir Starmer, who is as out of touch and internationalist as you can possibly get. Yep. So, you know, I think Reform are looking at an open goal. And I've supported Reform for a number of years. As a matter of fact, the first time I ever came on the station was because I was doing an internship with them, weirdly enough. But I think they are potentially a revolutionary force in British politics. With that being said, I am an ally, I am a supporter, but I'm not going to give them a free pass, because I think that there is still a lot more that they could be doing. There's a lot of political and rhetorical space still open that they should be occupying. Because if you look at Reform's analogues on the continent, so the AFD in Germany, the National Rally in France, and so on, these are parties that absolutely every single day they hit it, they hit it, they hit it. They leave no breathing room for the establishment parties. Yeah. I don't think Reform are doing this yet, and I think they should be. And I think if they did, we would see their polling numbers raise, you know, even further. Is
the danger that Reform absolutely have this incredibly loyal support, a sort of different kind of attachment to perhaps what a Conservative voter or a Labour voter might have? It's a sort of different relationship with the party. But ultimately, it's loud and it's convincing and the numbers are impressive, but ultimately never quite impressive enough, Charlie, not to win, not to go over the line. Is that the danger that parties like Reform face? And we have seen that in France, of course.
Well, Ian, on your first point there, this is an anecdote that I've told a number of people. I've been to and spoken at a number of different local Reform branch meetings and launches. And there is a phrase that comes up quite often, and that phrase is "our Nigel." And I think that is really interesting, because that speaks to the mindset of a lot of Reform support. It's our Nigel. He's our guy. Yeah. He's like our mate in a certain way. I think that's how a lot of people feel about him and feel about the party. Yeah. But as you say, you can have that, and that is an incredibly useful thing to have, this kind of the leader figure, you know, a charismatic leader. It's absolute dynamite in democratic politics. But you need to have the substance along with the rhetoric, right? And again, I think this is an area where a lot of people are still kind of scratching their heads when it comes to Reform. I think that there needs to be a far more clear kind of policy platform. I actually contributed to a Politics Home article that was released yesterday, where I said that they need to abandon this kind of Thatcherite economic platform, because this doesn't excite people anymore. People aren't crying out for the free market. If anything, young people especially are crying out for security. We want to be able to buy a house, right? We want to be able to start a family. Yep. And if Reform are able to tap into that sentiment, if they're able to tap into the fact that what we're missing as a country is not this kind of abstract idea of freedom and capitalism, but is instead some kind of sense of belonging, again, I think you've got a serious revolutionary force on your hands.
There it is. We're going to come back to that question. Why is Reform the party for you? Let's look at this story. Starmer dropping his manifesto pledges left, right and centre, it seems, Charlie. Health Secretary Wes Streeting was out and about yesterday. He was nearly caught out by the Sun's political editor Harry Cole over Labour's fundamentals yesterday. Safe to say, I don't think he was the only one drifting off during that speech. Let's have a listen to that interaction between the Health Secretary and Harry Cole.
It's all quite confusing, though, to the average punter. Can you remember what the three foundations are?
Yes, I can.
Go on,
it's
then.
Economic security, border security, and
The other one.
yes, national security.
There we go. And what about
You nearly got me there.
What about the seven? What about the seven
Happily.
pillars of growth? What about the seven pillars of growth?
Happily, Harry.
The Seven Pillars of Growth. Is that a Jeffrey Archer novel? It sounds like one, if it isn't. So there it is, Charlie. It seems even his own party aren't absolutely sure what the heck is going on, but we know that Mr Starmer did. He's reduced his clean energy pledge only by 5%. His target's now 95% by 2030 instead of 100%. The economic growth, the highest in the G7, is now labelled as an aim rather than a promise. So there is a diluting of what he originally told us.
Yeah, it's not a great look, is it, when one of your top guys can't remember your key messages?
Yeah.
But it's not surprising, because as we were just talking about, in my opinion, there is nothing more fundamental in politics, and actually beyond politics, when we're talking about the well-being of a nation, than leadership. Leadership is the #1 most important thing when we're talking about these kind of big issues. And you look at Starmer, and he's not a leader. He is, at best, a manager. You know, I think, for example, of times where I have worked in, worked as a bartender, for example. The manager is someone who is there, he's doing a job, he's not hugely invested in the job he's doing, he's just there to earn a living. That is the vibe I get from Keir Starmer. He's not a leader, he's not an owner, because the owner of a restaurant, there's a kind of personal investment in it, and there is a sense that, that they're trying to achieve something. The manager's there just punching a clock. And that is the feeling that I get, and I think a lot of other people get from Keir Starmer. He's this kind
100%.
of international figure. It's as like, especially this was the case when he sat down with Larry Fink from BlackRock a few weeks ago. There was the sense that he was the kind of, you know, the regional, the boss was coming down to speak to the regional manager. And so
it did feel like that, and then gave this weird statement that, you know, we need to be working with people like BlackRock, and it's like any Prime Minister should treat any sort of huge financial conglomerate like BlackRock should arm's length territory. I mean, you might want to do some deals, fine, but you know, to embrace them like a long lost child, as Starmer did. But as you rightly say, it's very hard to even find the right words to articulate just how appalling Keir Starmer is when it comes to leadership, because he's not a leader. He doesn't have, and now we're seeing it in action, these kind of pre-scripted moments. There's nothing. You know what Nigel's like, Nigel Farage. You know, he turns up and he could be on live TV with an audience of 10 million. And he'd stand there without a script, and he would, right off the bat, he would be able to give you a convincing 2.5, 3 minutes of why he believes his party should win. Starmer would have a team of 18 press people writing it, rehearsing it, going back, getting the word pillar in there, or aspiration, and all of those kind of sort of marketing terminology that they tend to they'd have it all going on, and that's the reason why he's no good.
This is the point here, is there's a number of different sort of things that a leader, qualities that a leader needs to have. And one of the most important, beyond rhetorical abilities and presentation, this sort of thing, it's just decisiveness. And weirdly enough, Starmer has actually talked the talk in this regard. He has said from the beginning that he's going to be there to make tough decisions, unpopular decisions, but necessary decisions. And to be fair, that's the kind of rhetoric that I would like to hear out of a Prime Minister. But with that being said, as this recent conference shows, he's not prepared to do that, because he's over the place.
And we don't, when he speaks, you don't get that sense that, well, he believes that. I mean, I'm fine with a politician, even if I disagree with him. I'll go, no, Jeremy Corbyn's a great example. Don't agree with Jeremy Corbyn, but I believe he believes what he's saying. You know, he's got a similar passion, and I respect that. That's his view. It might be bonkers as far as most of it are concerned, but it's his inner belief system, and he's never wavered in 40 years. And good luck to him in his own turf. We don't get that with the main two parties.